I always believed my marriage was unshakable. Daniel and I had been together for 12 years, weathering storms and celebrating triumphs. But one evening, as I folded laundry in the quiet of our bedroom, my phone buzzed with a notification that would unravel everything I thought I knew. It was a message from an unknown number. The words were simple but devastating. "You deserve to know. Check his messages." My heart raced as I stared at the screen, confusion and fear tangling in my chest. I debated ignoring it, but curiosity and suspicion won out. That night, I waited until Daniel had fallen asleep. My hands trembled as I reached for his phone on the nightstand. He had always been protective of it, a detail I had once dismissed as a quirk of his personality. Now it felt like a glaring red flag. To my surprise, the phone wasn't locked. My stomach churned as I opened his messaging app. At first, it seemed harmless, work conversations, family group chats, but then I saw her name, Melissa. There were dozens of messages, each one more intimate than the last. They spoke of stolen afternoons, secret dinners, and whispered promises that cut through me like a knife. "I can't wait to see you tomorrow," one read. Another, sent just hours earlier, "You make me feel alive again." My breathing became shallow, and I fought the urge to wake him up and demand answers right then and there. But I couldn't, not yet. I needed more than words on a screen. I needed proof, something undeniable. The next day, I pretended everything was normal. Over breakfast, Daniel chatted about a project at work, his voice calm and steady, as if he wasn't living a double life. I nodded and smiled, playing along, but my mind was racing. I needed to know the truth, how far this had gone, how long he had been lying to me. After he left for the office, I decided to follow him. It felt surreal, like I was starring in some terrible soap opera, but I couldn't sit idly by. I had to see it for myself. I parked a safe distance away from his workplace and waited. Hours passed. My heart sank each time someone exited the building, and it wasn't him. Just when I thought I'd wasted my time, he appeared. Only he wasn't alone. Melissa. She was younger than I'd imagined, with a bright smile and a carefree laugh that echoed in the crisp afternoon air. They walked side by side, his hand brushing hers before he took it completely. My stomach turned as I watched them cross the street and enter a small cafe. I stayed in my car, frozen, as a storm of emotions swirled inside me. Anger, heartbreak, humiliation. I couldn't believe this was the man I had shared my life with, the father of my children. The betrayal felt suffocating, but I couldn't look away. I couldn't just sit there and watch them. My hands clenched the steering wheel as I fought the urge to storm into the cafe and confront them. But I stopped myself. This wasn't the time or place. I needed a plan, something that would force him to face the truth without giving him the chance to twist the narrative. Instead, I took out my phone and snapped a photo of them through the windshield. My heart ached as I captured the image. Daniel leaning across the table, smiling at Melissa like she was his whole world. It was a smile I hadn't seen in years, one I thought was reserved for me. I drove away after that, my vision blurred with tears. My mind raced as I replayed the scene over and over again, trying to make sense of it all. When did this start? How long had he been lying to me? And more importantly, why? That evening, when Daniel came home, I watched him closely. He acted as if nothing had happened, kissing me on the cheek and asking about my day. The audacity of it all made my blood boil, but I forced myself to stay calm. I needed more answers before I confronted him. Later that night, when he was in the shower, I went through his phone again. This time, I found something even worse, an email confirming a hotel reservation for the upcoming weekend. My heart shattered as I read the details. A suite at a luxurious hotel just a few miles out of town. The reservation was for 2. I stared at the screen, my hand trembling as I processed the details of the reservation. The date was only 2 days away. I could almost see it unfolding in my mind. Daniel and Melissa laughing over room service, wrapped in sheets that weren't ours, living out some fantasy while I sat at home, clueless. But I wasn't clueless anymore, and I wasn't going to let this slide. The next day, I called my best friend, Priya. She had been my rock for years, someone I could trust with anything. I didn't want to bear this burden alone. When I told her everything, she was furious. "You can't let him get away with this," she said, her voice firm. "You need to confront him or catch him red-handed." That's when the idea struck me. If he wanted to live this lie, I'd make him face the consequences. I decided to go to the hotel on the night of the reservation. But I wouldn't go alone, I'd bring Priya for support. Together, we'd expose the truth in a way he couldn't deny or escape. Priya and I stepped into the hotel lobby, the grandeur of the place doing little to ease my racing heart. The chandeliers sparkled overhead, and the murmur of polite conversation filled the air. But all I could hear was the pounding of my pulse. We approached the front desk, and I asked the receptionist for Daniel's room number, pretending to be his wife, a role I was still entitled to, even if it no longer felt true. The receptionist hesitated, but ultimately gave me the information, her polite smile oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. Room 407. I gripped Priya's hand as we made our way to the elevator. Every step felt heavier than the last. My mind raced with possibilities. What I would find, what I would say, how he would react. When the elevator dinged and the doors opened on the 4th floor, I felt like I was walking into the unknown. We found the door, and I froze. Priya whispered, "You don't have to do this. We can leave right now." But I shook my head. I had come this far. I needed to see the truth for myself. I knocked. There was a pause, then footsteps. The door opened, and there he was. Daniel stood in front of me, his face pale, his eyes wide with shock. Behind him, Melissa was sitting on the bed, her expression shifting from confusion to panic as she saw me. "Emily," he stammered, "what are you doing here?" I stepped inside, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "I could ask you the same thing, Daniel, but I already know the answer." Melissa rose from the bed, her face flushed with embarrassment. "I didn't know," she began, but I cut her off. "Save it," I said, my gaze fixed on Daniel. "This isn't about her. This is about you, about us, about what you destroyed." He tried to explain, to apologize, but his words were empty. I told him I didn't want to hear excuses. I had given him everything, my love, my trust, my years, and he had thrown it all away. I turned to leave, but before I walked out the door, I said one final thing. "You made your choice, Daniel. Now I'm making mine." Priya and I walked out of the hotel, the weight of the confrontation lifting off my shoulders. It wasn't easy, but I felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. In the weeks that followed, I filed for divorce. It was messy and painful, but it was also necessary. With time, I began to heal. I focused on myself, my kids, and the future I deserved. I learned that betrayal doesn't define you, how you rise from it does. Years later, I would look back on that moment as the start of a new chapter, a chapter where I rediscovered my worth, my strength, and the love I had for myself. It had been a busy few months, and you could tell your wife had been feeling the weight of everything: work, family, and life's never-ending responsibilities. You decided it was time to show her how much she meant to you, so you planned a surprise that would remind her of your love and appreciation. After work, you spent the afternoon preparing everything. You started with a home-cooked meal, her favorite dish, one you knew she loved but hadn't had in ages. As you cooked, you set the dining room table, placing candles and arranging flowers just the way she liked. Soft music played in the background, filling the room with a soothing ambience. You also decided to add a personal touch. You wrote a heartfelt letter, recalling a moment from your past that always made her smile. The time finally came. You texted her, telling her to come home, making sure she didn't suspect anything. When she walked in the door, she was greeted by the soft glow of candlelight and the smell of the delicious meal. Her face lit up in surprise as she took in the scene, and you gently guided her to her seat. As she sat down, you served the food, making sure to remind her of how much you appreciated her. Between bites, you handed her the small box, a simple, unassuming gift. Inside, she found the letter, and as she read it, her eyes softened with emotion. You had written about a weekend getaway the two of you had taken years ago, a spontaneous trip filled with laughter, quiet moments, and shared dreams. It was a memory that held a special place in her heart. The evening unfolded in a peaceful, intimate way. You talked about old memories, your hopes for the future, and everything in between. The simple act of slowing down and cherishing the time together was enough to remind both of you why you fell in love in the first place. By the end of the night, your wife wasn't just grateful for the dinner or the surprise, she felt truly seen and loved. And for you, that was the most beautiful reward of all.